Hello there and welcome to a new econ video. This time we're going to look at production possibility frontiers, and in particular two aspects. We're going to use production possibility frontier analysis to show the maximum productive potential of an economy, and then secondly we're going to use PPF analysis to illustrate opportunity cost via marginal analysis. So let's start off with the basics, which is normally a definition. A production possibilities frontier, or PPF, is a diagram that shows all the possible maximum output levels of two products that can be produced when all of a country's factors of production are fully utilized. That's your definition. So a production possibility frontier is a diagram that shows the maximum output combinations of two products that can be produced when all your land, labour, capital and entrepreneurship is fully used. Fully used means not only are all factors of production employed, but they're also employed in an efficient manner. Nothing's been wasted. Factors of production, given the current state of technology, are used as efficiently as possible. So you could say that production possibility frontiers are an example of an economic model. You can use them to explain the choices and dilemmas facing countries at a national level. If you look back in older textbooks, you'll see that some people refer to production possibility frontiers as production possibility curves. So you might ask, what's the difference between a production possibility frontier, a PPF, and a production possibility curve, PPC? The answer to that question is there is no difference. They are just parallel terms for the same economic model. So let's look at the assumptions of the production possibility frontier model. The first is that the economy can only produce two products. The second is that the same resources, what we call factors of production, can be used to produce either or both of the two goods and can be shifted freely between them. Third assumption is that in the short run, the quantity and quality of a country's factors of production are fixed. So we can't get hold of any extra factors of production. And secondly, the quality of them is fixed. So we can't increase productivity, which is output per worker. We can't train or educate labour to improve its quality to enable us to produce more. So in the short run, the quantity and quality of a country's factors of production are fixed, and this is one of the key assumptions of PPF analysis. Fourth assumption, to operate on the edge of the PPF, all factors of production must be employed. They can be non-lying idle. Number 5, and furthermore, factors of production, must be used as efficiently as possible given the current state of technology. So let's take an example of a production possibility frontier. In this case, our economy can produce either goods or services. If we decided to put all of our factors of production into producing goods, we could produce 60 units of goods. However, if we made that decision, there'd be no factors of production producing services, so we would produce no services. The output of services would be 0. On the other hand, we could decide to put all of our factors of production into producing services. If we did this, we would be able to produce 40 units of services. But again, if we put all of our factors of production into producing services, there will be no factors of production employed producing goods. Therefore, the output of goods will be 0. Now, in most situations, you would imagine that the population of a country would want a combination of goods and services. So society might come to a collective decision to operate at a point such as A. And at point A, some of our factors of production are producing goods and some are producing services. So at point A, we'll assume that the economy is producing 45 goods and 20 services. It may well be that society prefers rather more services and fewer goods. If that's the case, we might decide to operate at point B, and at point B, we'll be producing 35 services and 20 goods. So if we were to join up these points, we would actually get a linear production possibility frontier that would show all the maximum output combinations of goods and services that the economy is capable of producing when all factors of production are fully utilized. So this is the production possibility frontier, or the PPF. So a long time ago in the 1970s, there was this guy, he was from France, called F.R. David, and he wrote this really cheesy pop song called Words, which I didn't like, but it was one of those songs that went round and round and round in your head. And we could actually use the theme of this song to emphasize the importance of words in economics. The first word that I'd like to introduce you to is marginal. Marginal in economics means one extra or one more, or indeed one less. In the context of eating crisps, one of my favourite activities, marginal utility would be the increase in my total utility gained from consuming one extra packet of crisps. So let's take an example there. You can see we've got 3 packets. So my preference actually probably would be for the cheese and onion. So this is my first packet of crisps. Maybe I get 50 utils of satisfaction from eating those crisps. If I decide to, I probably would go for the ready salted next. They might give me marginal utility of 40 utils. So after I've finished eating the ready salted crisps, my total utility at that point would stand at 90, 50 for the cheese and onion, 40 for the ready salted. At this point, because I'm old now, I'm not sure whether if I did eat the salt and vinegar crisps, I don't even really like those. Maybe the marginal utility of eating the salt and vinegar crisps might only be 10 utils of satisfaction. So if I did go ahead and eat that third packet, my total utility would be 100 utils. So one more time, marginal in economics means one extra or one more, and in this case we're talking about marginal utility, the increase in total utility created by consuming one more. Full disclosure here, I'm afraid to say when I was younger I once ate 16 packets of crisps in one go. I can tell you now that the marginal utility that I got from eating the 16th bag of crisps was very close to zero. I just about avoided being sick. Another example of the concept of marginality used in economics is marginal cost. So marginal cost is the addition to total cost caused by the production of one extra unit of output. The second word that I want to introduce you to is productivity. Now, this seems to cause major problems with many students. And the problem is that people conflate productivity with production. Productivity is output per unit of factor of production. So in the case of the productivity of labour, productivity is output per worker. As I say, that's a completely different matter from total output, which is called production. So one more time, productivity measures the output achieved from every unit of factor input. So let's look at how we could use the concept of productivity in production possibility frontier analysis. So economists use the word productivity to describe output per unit of input, and there are different types of productivity, as I've just said, but it is worth repeating, so I'll do it. The productivity of labour is equal to output per worker. The productivity of land is output per hectare or per acre if you want to go old school and use imperial measures. A linear or a straight-lined production possibility frontier implies constant factor productivity within each industry. For example, when employed in the service sector, every worker will add exactly the same amount to the output of services. So, as extra workers are hired to work in the services industry, the output of services will grow at a constant rate, creating a linear production possibility frontier. In practice, factors of production are not homogeneous, they're not identical. So if you took me, for example, I'm far more productive in teaching and writing than I am in car repairs. We're all unique, the only example of us that will ever exist. So some factors of production are better suited to some industries than to others. So in my example here, some workers might be better suited to the service sector than to the manufacturing sector. Workers that are best suited to producing services will obviously be hired first. Like, why would you hire somebody that wasn't very good at producing services if you could hire somebody who was better suited to that task? To increase service sector output, again, extra workers will be needed. Many of these workers will have been better suited to producing goods. This implies that there will come a point where the opportunity cost of producing services will begin to start rising. So let's take another example. On the screen there, you've got an economy that can produce either food or cars. So let's imagine that the starting point for our analysis is shown by point A. And at point A, we're producing C15 cars and F25 food. So if we decide to up the output of cars from C15 to C16, we'll need extra factors of production. Because we're operating on the edge of the frontier, there are no factors of production lying idle. So the extra factors of production that we need for cars will have to come out of food production. So the opportunity cost of the decision to increase the output of cars from C15 to C16 is a reduction in the output of food from F25 to F24. So at the moment we've got a 1-for-1 opportunity cost trade-off, which implies that the labour that we moved out of food into cars was equally productive in either industry. So we're now at point B. Let's suppose that we want to increase the output of cars again from C16 to C17. So this time we want to move from point B to point C. So again, we've got to transfer some more labour out of food production into car production. Now this time, some of the labour that we're moving over, it might have been better suited to producing food than to working in a car factory. So yes, we managed to increase the output of cars from 16 units to 17 units, but because the labour that we moved into car production was better suited to food production, the opportunity cost in terms of lost food output is considerable. You can see that the decision to raise the output of cars from 16 to 17 units has caused the output of food to fall from 24 units to 14 units. And this is because, again, what I'm saying is that the factors of production that we moved out of food into car manufacturing, it was more suited to food production than it was to car production. So as we move towards either end of the production possibility frontier, we get an increasing marginal opportunity cost trade-off. And this, as I say one more time, it reflects the fact that in practice, some factors of production are better suited to some industries than to others. Okay, the next thing that we're going to look at is how we might use the production possibility frontier to show the maximum productive potential of an economy. The diagram that you can see there is a production possibility frontier for an economy that can produce either goods or services. So as you know, the production possibility frontier is a diagram that shows all the possible maximum output combinations of two products, in this case goods and services, that can be produced when all factors of production are fully utilised. If the economy is operating at any point on the edge of its PPF, national output can't be any higher. In other words, national output has been maximised, which means that the economy has achieved its productive potential. At points A, B and C, the economy is producing as much as it can. It's achieved, therefore, its productive potential. That's what this term means, productive potential. The economy is producing as much as it's able to produce. So let's look at these points A, B and C and see what's going on. So there's point A. At point A, we can produce G1 goods and S1 services. There's point B, but a bit further down the curve. At point B, we're putting slightly more factors of production into producing services. So we can produce S2 services. But because we've put more factors of production into services, there are fewer available for goods. So that's why the output of goods is G2, which is slightly down on the G1 that we achieved at point A. Point C is even further down the PPF towards the services axes. So at point C, the output of goods is down again at G3. Why? Well, factors of production have been moved out of goods into services, which allows us to produce S3 services, which is more than what we were producing at point B, which was S2. You can use production possibility frontier analysis to illustrate unemployment. You can even get away with doing this in a macroeconomics exam. Sometimes it might be an entirely appropriate diagram to use. Unemployment is technically described as a situation where you have somebody who isn't working, they're out of work, but they are of working age, and they're available for work, and they're actively seeking work. So, as you know, labour is a factor of production. So if there's unemployment present within an economy, the economy can't be fully utilising all of its factors of production. So we can think about what that might mean in terms of a PPF diagram if we're not fully utilising labour, probably one of the most important of our factors of production. Okay, so in this case we've got an economy that can produce either food or healthcare. So the maximum combinations of those two goods that can be produced when all factors of production are fully utilised is shown by the red PPF diagram that's on the screen. Now, if there's unemployment, we can't be operating at a point on the edge of the frontier because labour is a factor of production. And if we've got unemployment, we're not using all of that factor of production called labour. So therefore, we must be operating at a point such as A, which is inside the production possibility frontier. And at point A, we're only able to produce F1 food and H1 healthcare. Now, this is a problem. If we could eliminate unemployment, if we could find jobs for everybody who is currently unemployed, the economy then would be able to operate on the edge of its PPF because we would then be fully utilising all of our factors of production, including labour. And if we were to get from point A to point B, we would be able to increase the output of food from F1 to F2 and the output of healthcare from H1 to H2. So in macroeconomics, we talk about GDP, which is the total money value of all goods and services produced within an economy over the last year. So in this case, our GDP with the unemployment problem at point A would only have been F1 plus H1. If we can eliminate unemployment and achieve what economists call full employment, a situation where everybody of working age who is available for work and actively seeking work has got a job, if we can achieve that situation and get to point B, our GDP will increase to F2 plus H2. So we'd achieve this thing called economic growth. The output of the economy would increase. So let's draw some conclusions. To operate on the edge of the PPF, all factors of production must be fully utilised. Labour is a factor of production. Therefore, if the economy is suffering from unemployment, we won't be fully utilising all of our factors of production, which means that we will be operating at a point inside the PPF, such as point A. If jobs can be found for all of the unemployed, it will be possible to move to a point on the edge of the frontier, For example, point B. Achieving full employment is a very important macroeconomic policy objective. This is because national output will increase if unemployment can be cut. In this case, at point A, the economy's GDP was F1 plus H1. After the elimination of unemployment, it's now possible to operate at point B and achieve a higher GDP of F2 plus H2. It's important to maximise the economy's output. This is because the more that society can produce, the more it will be able to consume. It's also said that you can use production possibility frontier analysis to show an unattainable position. This always makes me want to laugh, really. I kind of think of something else when people refer to unattainable positions, but we'll leave that one. So again, we've got an economy that can produce either goods or services. The maximum output combinations of goods and services that can be achieved when all factors of production are fully utilised is shown by the PPF. Point X is an unattainable position. This is because it lies to the right of the existing production possibilities frontier. To get to point A, we'll need to shift the production possibility frontier out to the right. We'll need to increase the productive potential of the economy, and we'll talk about that in another lesson. So the final thing that we'll look at today is using the production possibility frontier to illustrate the concept of opportunity cost. So let's take another example of a different situation. In this case, our economy can produce either consumer goods or healthcare. Incidentally, this is one of the beauties of production possibility frontier analysis. You're allowed to choose the axes according to whatever point that you want to make. So the PPF, as I say, shows all the maximum output combinations of consumer goods and healthcare that this economy can achieve when all its factors of production are fully utilised. So let's start off at point A. We could choose to operate there. At point A, we're producing C1 consumer goods and H1 healthcare. Now, let's assume that, I don't know, there's been some health pandemic or something. Or maybe just society decides that its preferences have changed and society would like rather more healthcare. So let's assume that society wants H2 healthcare rather than H1. To achieve that, extra factors of production will be needed. We're already on the edge of the PPF. So where are those factors of production going to come from? Well, there aren't any lying idle, so they've got to come out of the output of consumer goods. So if we want to increase the output of healthcare from H1 to H2, we've got to move down the production possibility frontier and operate at point B rather than point A. And by taking factors of production out of consumer goods, we'll obviously cut the output of consumer goods. We'll only be able to produce C2 now because we don't have as many factors of production producing consumer goods as we did before, because we've moved some out of consumer goods so that they can be moved into the production of healthcare. So in this case, what you could say in conclusion is that the opportunity cost of the decision to raise the output of healthcare from H1 to H2 is a reduction in the output of consumer goods from C1 to C2. So, in summary, or to recap one more time, The written commentary that you would write for this, you'd say in an exam, transmission mechanisms are very important. So you would start off with something like the economy's currently operating at point A, producing C1 consumer goods and H1 healthcare. So you explain or commentate on your diagram, and you explain it in chronological time sequence order. So we're starting off at point A. We're assuming that we're producing C1 consumer goods and H1 healthcare. So you then explain that society decides that it would like the output of healthcare to increase from H1 to H2. To produce more healthcare, additional factors of production will be needed in the healthcare industry. But where will these extra or additional factors of production come from? Point A is on the edge of the PPF. Therefore, all factors of production are already being used. There aren't any lying idle that we can use. So as I say, if you want to increase the output of healthcare, yeah, great. You'll need extra factors of production, but where will they come from? Question mark. There aren't any lying idle, because one of the assumptions of the PPF is that to operate on the edge of the frontier, all factors of production must be fully utilised. Therefore, if we want to produce more healthcare, we will have to transfer the factors of production that we need from consumer goods into healthcare. And that's what's coming next in our commentary. So you explain that the only solution is to transfer the factors of production that we need from the production of consumer goods. But taking factors of production out of producing consumer goods will cut the output of consumer goods. There's a typo there. You can just cross out the fewer. We don't need that. This explains why the opportunity cost of increasing the output of healthcare from H1 to H2 is a decrease in the output of consumer goods from C1 to C2. So that brings us to the end of another economics video. In this case, the takeaway, I guess, is that the economic model of the production possibility frontier is very useful, because you can use it to illustrate the concept of opportunity cost at a national level. If we choose to use resources in a particular direction, that means that the opportunity cost of that is that there will be fewer resources available for other industries to use. Okay, I hope that you find that useful.